As a film lover in 2026, when cinema seems increasingly relegated to the back burner of cultural relevance, it's hard for me to imagine the enormity of the impact The Exorcist had on society. I mean, this movie was nothing less than a genuine sociological phenomenon.
I fainted like 10 minutes after the first beginning of the movie.
A 1974 Times article described 8 a.m. screenings with lines 5,000 people long. An LA theater manager claimed that each showing produced 4 blackouts, 6 instances of vomiting, and numerous people bailing into the lobby. In Berkeley, a man charged the screen to try and fight the demon. Church attendance and demands for IRL exorcisms skyrocketed. An esteemed medical journal claimed the film induced a novel form of traumatic neurosis. Even the Zodiac Killer mentioned the film in his last letter. This film people up. But as wild as all that is, I'd argue the most fascinating part of this franchise lies somewhere else, in its absolute train wreck of a sequel. Indeed, the much maligned Exorcist II: The Heretic was so poorly received that UCLA students straight up rioted after its premiere at the Bruin Theater. Many people, including William Friedkin, director of the original, have called it the worst movie ever made. But there is one director who prefers it to the original, and he's kind of a big deal. See, I have a fascination with a certain kind of sequel. Not the common cash grab variety, not the rare miracle that's better than the original, not even the ones that can't possibly outshine their predecessor, but still come up with something really solid. What intrigues me are the sequels that try to outdo the first one with big brain ambition. They understand what made the original tick and put a ridiculous amount of legitimately intelligent philosophical thought into how to follow it up, only to fail miserably. This is the case of The Exorcist II, a film helmed by a writer-director team that had nothing to do with the original and modeled almost entirely on the theories of a controversial scientist priest whose work was literally banned by the Catholic Church. It takes the franchise into an ideological left turn that is nothing less than insane, and I'm kind of obsessed with it. If the first Exorcist aspired to revive faith in an increasingly secular world, then The Exorcist II said, nah, that ain't it. Instead of reviving faith, it aspired to revise faith, to re-engineer religion so that it can be integrated with a more scientifically oriented world. Imagine the balls to try something like that. So get yourself a bowl of pea soup, subscribe to the channel, and get ready to explore how a couple of madmen with a taste for radical sci-fi theology ruined The Exorcist. Let's dive in. But first, a quick recap of both films. The original Exorcist follows young Regan McNeil, who starts displaying violent and inexplicable behavior, making her mother Chris, a famous actress, put her through a gauntlet of medical tests that offer 0 answers. With no other options, Chris turns to Father Karras, a psychiatrist priest wrestling with a crisis of faith and crushing guilt over his mother's recent death. Karras teams up with the archaeologist priest Father Marin, who recognizes the evil entity from a previous encounter abroad. Together, they attempt to exorcise the demon. Marin dies, and Karras makes the ultimate sacrifice by inviting the demon into his own body and jumping out a window to save Regan. The Exorcist II picks up 4 years later. Father Lamont, a disciple of Father Marin going through his own crisis of faith, is tasked by the Vatican to investigate Marin's death, leading him to a psychiatric institute where Dr. Tuscan is treating a repressed Regan using a futuristic hypnosis machine called the Synchronizer. Using the Synchronizer, Lamont and Regan mind meld, revealing that the demon, now identified as Pazuzu, is still dormant within Regan and targets her because she is a specially evolved human with special powers, like portending the future and healing sick children. Lamont travels to Africa to seek out another one of these special humans who Pazuzu once possessed, a man named Kokomo. In a vision, Kokomo explains via locusts that people like he and Regan are needed to ensure humanity can peacefully transition to the next stage of evolution. Lamont tries to purge Pazuzu from Regan once and for all, culminating in a climactic showdown where Regan uses her powers to defeat the demon. The end. If you show The Exorcist to someone today and expect it to trigger the same kind of freakouts it did in the 70s, you're gonna be disappointed. The film is more of a psychological drama than a horror film, and those reactions were very much a product of the cultural moment. To understand that context, it's helpful to start on April 8, 1966, when Time magazine ran a now infamous cover asking, "Is God dead?" Overnight, this image became a symbol for the era's crisis of faith. The power of church authority was declining, scientific thinking was on the rise, and humanism was becoming culturally dominant. It captured the growing belief in the secularization narrative, or the idea that as science and technology advance, religious belief gradually fades away because it's no longer necessary. The issue's release was a defining moment for the culture. All of a sudden, the disappearance of God from public life felt palpable. It even appeared 2 years later in Rosemary's Baby, a film about a lapsed Catholic who's overcome by a coven of Satanists in a world where God's presence is seemingly absent.
God is dead! Satan lives!
William Peter Blatty, writer and creator of The Exorcist, hated Rosemary's Baby and what he considered its death of God message, so he wrote The Exorcist as a direct Catholic rebuttal. Where Rosemary's Baby showed a godless world where evil advances unimpeded, The Exorcist took the opposite stance. It treats the presence of evil as evidence of the divine. Even the film's opening title card mimics the color and style of the Time cover, positioning the movie as a counter-argument to the secularization narrative. In order to reassert the relevance of religion, Blatty sets the film in a modern secular environment where people have, perhaps heuristically, moved past faith. The film takes place in Georgetown, not small-town America, but a university environment where religion is treated as an academic subject. Reagan's mom is a divorced actress modeled after Shirley MacLaine, who was famously spiritual but not religious and outspokenly independent. Reagan's father is never even seen on screen, and Chris doesn't consult a religious figure until all medical options are exhausted. Even Father Karras barely has any belief left.
I think I've lost my faith, Tom.
He's a psychiatrist priest trained to know more about complexes than demons, and when his mother dies, he's racked with guilt that he didn't provide enough, not comforted that she's at peace with the Lord now. All this matters because it sets the groundwork for the divine's return to be extra shocking. Blatty once described the film as a story about the negative proof of the existence of God. If you can prove there's a devil, then there has to be a God. Blatty even inserted the meaning directly into the film, or, well, at least he tried to. But to break that down, I'm going to turn to my collaborator on this video, Paul, from the channel Heavy Spoilers. Take it away, Paul.
Hey Jared, thanks for having me on because, yeah, this is a movie I've wanted to talk about for a while, but I think I just kept putting it off on my channel because it's such an insane deviation from the first film and not well liked by many people. Obviously, The Exorcist is one of the most socially impactful movies in history, and this was quite a weird follow-up. There was a lot of clashing between the author and director as well that I think led to a lot of different interpretations over where to take this one. In the original, Blatty's intended meaning was encapsulated in a scene that was originally cut due to Friedkin deeming it too on the nose. And Blatty and Friedkin argued about this for years. Friedkin eventually came to agree with Blatty, and the scene was restored in the 2000 re-release.
Why this grew doesn't make sense.
I think the point is to make us despair, to see ourselves as animal and ugly, to reject the possibility that God could love us.
I feel like this is pushing the point that if the devil can make humanity seem unworthy of God's love, then maybe God never cared for us. Or maybe he isn't even there. In many ways, Karras' final act overturns that and proves that good is more powerful than despair, and that selfless sacrifice is evidence of God working through people. Ultimately, the film's reassertion of the need for religion in a culture that was drifting away from it. And part of the reason it hit so hard is that it awakened a kind of dormant religious guilt that people thought that they were done with. Stephen King even once said the movie was really about a generation gap and secular children of the 60s who were suddenly confronted with and terrorized by the moral framework of their grandparents. I'm actually working on a breakdown of The Shining at the moment, and then I would love it if you jumped on our Dr. Sleep one as well, Jared, where we can kind of talk more about sequels that follow on from legendary horrors, which yeah, is definitely the case here as well. But yeah, that's what the writers of the sequel inherited, and for that, we're going back to you, Jared.
Thanks, Paul. Be sure to check me out on Paul's Dr. Sleep video on the Heavy Spoilers channel. Link is in the description. Okay, so now imagine you're a writer named William Goodhart, and you, along with director John Boorman, have been hired to helm the sequel to one of the most successful movies of all time with basically a blank slate. What do? Well, usually it's a bad idea to refuse to play the yes and game. Instead of building on the thematic foundation of the first film, you swerve into something else entirely. The most notorious recent example is The Last Jedi, wherein the internet melted down for 5 years straight after Rian Johnson took all the narrative seeds planted in The Force Awakens, ignored them, and turned the franchise in the opposite ideological direction, from Abrams' reverent celebration of Star Wars mythology to Johnson's cynical deconstruction of it. But Goodhart didn't quite pull a Rian Johnson. He actually did draw from the original to inspire his continuation, just not the most obvious element. See, the character of Father Merrin was based on the Jesuit priest and paleontologist Pierre Teilhard de Chardin. Like Teilhard, Merrin is both a man of the cloth and a scientist. The beginning of the film depicts Merrin on an archaeological dig in Iraq, a nod to Teilhard's geological career. In fact, one of the reasons Max von Sydow was cast as Merrin was because he was a dead ringer for Teilhard. Thing is, Merrin was modeled after Teilhard in only a vague sense. Merrin doesn't carry any of Teilhard's ideas. I think Blatty just wanted to draw on a figure who existed at the intersection of faith and modern knowledge, so that when the possession becomes undeniable, it hits way harder. But Goodhart ran with it, making Teilhard's thought the backbone of the plot, resulting in a sequel that fundamentally opposes everything the original stood for. Teilhard de Chardin's life project was nothing less than a total synthesis of science and faith. He aspired to give Christianity a cosmic evolutionary framework grounded in his training as a scientist. His ideas were so controversial that his most famous text, The Phenomenon of Man, was forbid from print by the Catholic Church, only to be released after his death in 1955. At the core of Teilhard's thought is one radical claim. It's impossible to fully comprehend the universe because it's still unfinished. The essence of God lies in the future. So instead of the divine existing in a perfect past before humanity's fall, the fullness of God lies in the future, and God pulls us toward that ideal through evolution. Evolution, then, is a holy process by which the universe grows more complex, more conscious, and more interconnected. Ultimately, hearts, minds, and consciousness will converge into the omega point, a state of higher unity achieved via a process of increasing complexification he called cosmogenesis, which is essentially the process by which the universe awakens and becomes God. In The Exorcist II, Lamont explicitly references Teilhard.
Do priests believe in ESP?
Some do. In fact, a French priest, Teilhard de Chardin, thought that we'd all come together eventually in some sort of mental telepathy. A kind of world mind in which everybody would share.
When is that supposed to happen?
Father Merrin himself believed that with modern scientific research it could happen quite soon. But if it happens before we're ready, we may find ourselves pointing in the wrong direction. Towards Satan.
Okay, so let's break down the Teilhardian ideas implicit in Lamont's speech and how they manifest in the film. The first is that, quote, "will all come together." Teilhard described the process of cosmic evolution via 3 stages. Divergence, in which life spreads outward in multitude, think single-cell organisms spreading across the planet. Then convergence, when a critical threshold is passed and these organisms begin to integrate. And finally, the last stage, emergence, when this unification yields more complex levels of being.
You remember how Father Merrin prophesied that new men would arise to purge evil from the earth? They may already be among us.
Thus, Reagan is an early emergent stage entity, a manifestation of humanity's next evolutionary step. She and Kokomo possess heightened psychic capacities that signal humanity's movement toward greater unity. At one point, Reagan cures a mute autistic girl by entering her subjectivity.
First she was talking inside, and then she started talking outside.
And only Kokomo can protect his tribe by taming a swarm of predatory locusts. The second Teilhardian notion is that pointing evolution in the wrong direction leads to Satan. For Teilhard, evil is not primarily a historical fall from perfection. It's more the unfinished part of unfinished universe. Basically, evil appears where evolution and complexification are blocked, where forward movement toward God is hindered.
You gotta fight that demon that's inside her. It's preventing her from reaching full spiritual power.
If Reagan and Kokomo represent great good, aka the emerging evolutionary unity, then the demon Pazuzu pursues them to stop cosmogenesis. Great good attracts great evil because it threatens to move humanity closer to its divine future.
This boy
He has very special powers. They need his help against the locust swarm. But perhaps the swarm comes because of the boy. Does great goodness draw evil upon itself?
In a vision, Father Lamont sees Kokomo explain this evolutionary process via grasshoppers.
When it is dry, the grasshoppers go their own way. Happy-go-lucky individuals. Why then, they crowd together. Their wings brush against each other. The agitation transforms them.
So the grasshoppers start off as individuals, phase 1, divergence. Then they multiply and start to crowd together, phase 2, convergence, and this is the critical point in which evil can corrupt evolution.
Brushing of the wings changes their personality. They become a destructive, voracious, marauding swarm. The evil swarm sweeps relentlessly over the earth, possessing all that it touches.
But luckily there are more evolved good locusts that guide the mass away from evil.
She has been evolved to resist the brushing of the wings. We like to call her the good locust.
Reagan is the good locust, capable of guiding humanity away from destructive convergence and toward emergent complexity, toward God. The last is the whole thing about ESB and converging into a world mind. See, Teilhard believed that evolution involves not just physical bodies, but thought and consciousness as well. He believed that as our subjective lives, all the social, political, informational, and technological elements complexify, the Earth would be increasingly encircled in thought, which he called the noosphere. This is what Lamont is referring to when he mentions telepathy, which is not quite what Teilhard meant, but close enough, I guess. This is why the film centers on the hypnosis machine that allows Lamont to enter Reagan's consciousness. It's a kinda crude attempt to recognize the importance of subjective integration as an evolutionary step. Because for Teilhard, we have to expand our minds. To do anything less than deepen our understanding of science, of our interconnectedness, would fail to do justice to Christ's redemption. So in the end, Reagan saves the day, tames Pazuzu's swarm of locusts, and rekindles Lamont's faith. The hindrance to humanity's evolution has been stopped, and the good locusts can lead the charge toward God. It's an insane direction to take the franchise. Never mind, the movie doesn't really work, and hearing actors say Pazuzu is cringe every single time.
Pazuzu?
Pazuzu.
Pazuzu.
Pazuzu?
It also completely retcons the first film and spits on its message. Reagan is no longer a random innocent whose suffering is meant to cause despair. Now Reagan is deliberately targeted because she's a superhuman who must be stopped from advancing humanity. In the first, evil degrades and humiliates us, but we're worthy of God's love despite being animal and ugly. The second film turns a spiritual crisis into a sci-fi arms race between good and evil. There's a word that describes it: heretical, which actually makes the film's title a bit genius. Most literally, it refers to Lamont as a follower of Marin/Teilhard, but on a meta level, it also refers to the movie itself, and maybe even Goodhart and Borman. In 1975, the University of Missouri School of Medicine conducted a series of tests on the impact of The Exorcist. The study concluded that the film significantly increased beliefs about the supernatural. A movie shaped people's beliefs about reality. That was the legacy these guys inherited, and you have to respect the sheer rarity of the opportunity to follow up on something like that. Maybe, once in a lifetime, an artist is given a shot at shaping the intellectual and spiritual development of millions, and instead of just regurgitating the ideas of the first one, Borman and Goodhart seized the opportunity to say something new, and maybe even productive. Because was this return to faith the original spurned even sustainable?
Well, I'm a Catholic. It makes me want to go to church.
Could a population hurtling toward a future of scientific dominance and technological acceleration really be satisfied long term with a God is not dead message? Arguably not. And Teilhard's ideas, while still controversial, offer an undeniably hopeful theology. Humanity isn't fallen, we're simply unfinished. We're not exiles from some lost Eden, condemned to claw our way back to some impossible purity. That perfection is still ahead of us, and we can participate in realizing it. We don't need to shy away from the modern world. Science and technology don't need to threaten our faith. They can be the means by which we get closer to God. So maybe re-engineering the series to fuse science and faith wasn't as unhinged as it sounds. Maybe a little heresy was in order. In a way, The Exorcist 2 aspires to do what Reagan does, be the good locust, and infect the audience with hopeful ideas. Ideas that, at least to its creators, can guide people through a world that is increasingly scientific, but no less in need of spirituality. The Exorcist 2 is many things, but cynical cash grab isn't one of them. It's sincere, ambitious, and that already puts it far above most sequels. And hey, even trying to do something this conceptually wild with millions of dollars of studio money and Hollywood A-listers will always be, in my book, absolutely hardcore. Hey, y'all, thanks for watching. Don't forget to check me out on the Heavy Spoilers channel, where Paul and I break down another sequel to a horror classic, Dr. Sleep, and this is also quite an interesting one. Be sure to subscribe to the channel, and I'll catch you next time. Peace.